Now, I got to fast forward in time here a little bit. We go from the 1760s up to 1803. I don't want to spoil the surprise for you, but we win the revolution, okay? Write it down if you need to. It's America. Speak American now. Now, here's the deal. We are a very young nation. By this point, we are 16 years old. We do things that 16-year-olds do. We are in a situation by 1803 where we say, we need to keep going westward. We gotta find out what's out there. We don't really know why, but we gotta go. By 1803, we have picked up a few more states in the Union, but we're gonna find ourselves in a very difficult spot. We are going to bump up against a superpower. France has claimed and controlled this gigantic chunk of territory in the middle of what will be the United States for years. Now, they have claimed this, they've even mildly settled it. There's an old saying, when two superpowers share a border, there will be conflict. At this point, France is the strongest country on earth. And now we've bumped up against them. Now, we are far from being a superpower by 1803. Far from it. But we are on the rise. We're a new nation. We are growing. We do have a decent military power, and we're well financed. But we have a big problem. The person in charge of France at this point is maybe the finest military mind in the history of the world. Napoleon Bonaparte has, on multiple occasions, taken on the other European powers, sometimes one at a time, sometimes as allies, and beaten them all every time. He's an absolute genius and a bit of a lunatic. Now I need to ask first. I bet there's something you know about Napoleon. What do you know about him? Twice. He escaped one time.
Oh, yeah.
And comes back to be the Emperor of France again. That's one thing. Sure. Yes, Carl? He was probably about 5'2". Mom and Aunt's had 2 inches on him. He was probably about 5'2", and you never really know, but probably he always resented this, which means Napoleon was really aggressive as well. He's a bit of a lunatic. Now, this is a big problem for us. We have this desire, this God-willing right to go west, and now we bump up against the French and their Louisiana territory. We have a president who sees this as a potential problem. But President Jefferson knows, do not go to war with France. Do not take on Napoleon. It would not go well. We need a deal. We need a way around the problem. Because going to war is not an option. Now, Jefferson looks at this situation, he says, I think we have an opportunity here. I believe we can get what we want and, in fact, avoid war. What Jefferson says is, we just need access. Really, all we need is a way to get to the Mississippi River. Jefferson comes up with a plan that's actually pretty sharp. What he proposes is simply buying the city of New Orleans. Now, New Orleans is a French city. They've controlled it for years and years. It is thriving, but it's very geostrategically important. New Orleans is right at the mouth of the Mississippi River. You control New Orleans, you can control the shipping. You can control who gets into the Mississippi and who gets out of the Mississippi, the major waterway of the country. Now, Jefferson wants it so that American trade ships can cruise the Mississippi. This would be economically a very wise choice. But he has to convince Napoleon, a guy who is known to be very aggressive, who's beaten all the European powers before. He needs to be reasoned with very carefully. Jefferson's going to trust someone. Probably an excellent choice. He is going to send James Monroe, a very well-educated man and a very shrewd negotiator. He sends him off to France and tells him, look, all we really need is New Orleans. We gotta see if Napoleon's willing to sell. He sends Monroe with basically a briefcase with $5 million in it. And he tells Monroe, this is gonna be a negotiation here. I'm hoping and I'm thinking we can get New Orleans for $2 million. But like any good negotiation, start low, and if you need to, you can work your way up. Monroe takes basically this briefcase of $5 million off to France, and he meets Napoleon, 5'2", lunatic. Says, Emperor, it's so nice to meet you. I think we can do something where it'll help us and help you. And Napoleon basically meets Monroe and he says, enough, sit down, we're talking. Keep in mind, it's a bit of a lunatic. Monroe sits down with Napoleon. He says, Emperor, I have with me a deal and the okay by the American president. I want to offer you $2 million for New Orleans. Napoleon just looks back at him and he's puzzled. $2 million for New Orleans? No, next. And Monroe's kind of taken back and goes, okay, you know what? I'll sweeten the deal. $3 million for New Orleans. And here's Napoleon just looking at, just pacing. He says, $3 million for New Orleans? What? No, next. Monroe goes, all right, not here to waste your time. I'll give you $5 million for New Orleans. And Napoleon looks back and he goes, I'm not here to nickel and dime. How much for the whole thing? Now Monroe is there to buy that piece of it. Napoleon's offered him everything. Monroe doesn't know what to do here. He says, I don't understand. What do you mean? Napoleon just looks back at him and goes, I don't want it anymore. You want it. I don't need a Western empire. I've got much bigger problems. What Napoleon tells Monroe, basically straight up, face to face, I'm about to face off against the biggest empires in the world. I'm about to face off against basically every major European power. Powers that are allying themselves together that never ally themselves together. The Spanish have allied themselves with the Brits. The Brits have allied themselves with the Italians. The Italians have allied themselves with the Russians. They're all coming together to fight Napoleon. And Napoleon tells Monroe, I don't need that giant chunk of land on the other side of the world anymore. I need cash, and I need it right now. How much for the whole thing? Now let's kind of think through a little bit here. Monroe wanted that for $5 million. Well, $2 million. Now Napoleon says how much for the whole thing. What do you think Monroe has going through his mind at this point? What do you think he envisions? Just go, how little can I get it for? Napoleon's basically just showed his hand. Monroe says, you know what? I'm going to let you make the first offer. How much are you willing to sell that for? And Napoleon just looks back at me and goes, you understand, I have time. $15 million. Done. This right here, Monroe wanted for $5 million. Now he offers this for 15. Do we have a good deal in front of us here? Monroe writes back to Jefferson because he doesn't have the cash on it. He writes him back and says, I need $10 million more. I need it now. We get the whole thing. Jefferson writes him back and says, I don't think you understood. That's no way that's accurate. Monroe just writes him back and says, I need it right now. Make it happen. Jefferson writes him back and says, I don't even think I have the power to do that. Jefferson was always afraid of too much power. And he says, you know what? I'll worry about it later. Let's make a deal. He sends $10 million off to Monroe. With the stroke of a pen, Napoleon gets $15 million and signs over to us over 800,000 square miles of territory. Now, just to kind of give you an idea, if you made this deal today, just the land portion of it, not the buildings, the structures that are on it now, if you made the deal today, it would probably cost about $50 trillion. We get it for $15 million. Napoleon sells us this giant chunk of land for 3 cents an acre. With